Okay, so get this. Imagine enough plastic to circle the Earth 4 times. That's how much we're throwing away every year. It's a lot, right? But that's why we're here today. To deep dive into some potential solutions, we've got two really interesting sources for this. One is a study on chemically breaking down a certain type of plastic. The other is a big picture review as a whole global plastic waste situation.
Yeah, and it's a huge issue. Like that review actually predicts that by 2050, we'll have produced a total of 34 billion tons of plastic. It's crazy.
34 billion, that's almost impossible to imagine. Definitely makes finding new solutions seem pretty urgent. And that's what's so cool about this chemical recycling study. They're using metal catalysts to break down plastic so we can use the components again,
Right.
which is amazing. But I think I need a little help understanding exactly what a catalyst does.
Oh, yeah, sure. A catalyst is like a facilitator. Or think of it like a matchmaker at a speed dating event for molecules. They just bring those molecules together in just the right way so they react. But the catalyst itself doesn't get used up in the process.
Okay, so they're kind of like the ultimate wingman for chemical reactions then.
Exactly. And what's really interesting about this study is they found a super effective catalyst. It's a specific combination of magnesium and cobalt, or if you want to get technical, it's called MgCo2. And it's incredibly good at breaking down this particular type of plastic.
So what makes this MG so special? Why is everyone so excited about it?
Well, this specific combination, it just turned out to be way more efficient at breaking down the plastic than other catalysts. And here's why everyone's excited. The researchers think it could be scaled up. Like we could use it to recycle way more than just this one type of polycarbonate,
Yeah.
potentially even polyesters and polyethers too.
Wow, so this could be huge. Not just a one-hit wonder, but maybe a whole new way of recycling. But I did notice something kind of interesting in the study. They said the catalyst properties have to be in a sweet spot. What does that even mean?
So it turns out there's this delicate balance in the catalyst, like how sticky it is, that's its nucleophilicity, or how much it wants to donate electrons, and also how strongly it can attract electrons from other molecules, which is its Lewis acidity. If either of those is too high or too low, the reaction doesn't work as well. It's like Goldilocks, it's got to be just right.
Mm.
And it seems like this Mg catalyst is just right.
Sounds like some pretty serious chemistry going on at the molecular level.
For sure. And that actually brings up an interesting point about the bigger picture here.
You mean how this one discovery could change how we recycle a bunch of stuff? That's exactly what I was thinking. And it's the perfect bridge to our next source, which zooms out to the global level.
Exactly, because when we look at the big picture, this global review really highlights just how big the plastic problem really is. And it's not just about like soda bottles and plastic bags, you know?
Right, it's way more than that.
Exactly. It's kind of wild how many things actually contribute to plastic waste. You've got construction materials, agricultural films, even all that personal protective equipment, the PPE from the pandemic. That's plastic waste too.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about all the masks and gloves. That must added a ton of plastic waste.
Yeah, for sure. The pandemic definitely made the plastic problem worse. And a lot of that waste, unfortunately, ends up mismanaged, especially in developing countries, which is a real problem.
Yeah, that really stood out to me in the review. It seems like developing countries are hit hardest by mismanaged plastic waste. It's like an environmental justice issue on top of everything else.
Absolutely. And that's why the idea of a circular economy is so important.
Right, because it's not just about the environment, it's about people too. So how does a circular economy help with that global imbalance?
Well, it tries to move away from that old linear model, where we take resources, make stuff, use it, and then toss it. A circular economy aims to keep materials in use for as long as possible.
So we're actually closing the loop instead of creating more waste.
Exactly. Designing stuff to be reused or repaired. So materials can circulate back into the economy instead of becoming trash. If we get it right, everyone benefits.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've got the science working on better ways to recycle the plastic we already have, and the circular economy concept to change how we use plastic in the first place. What other solutions did the review talk about? I know they mentioned some cool new technologies for managing plastic waste.
Oh yeah, they talked about some really interesting technologies. Like one that really caught my eye was the sea bin.
Oh yeah, the sea bin. I read about that.
It's basically like a floating trash can, right?
Mm-hmm.
They put it in marinas,
Mm-hmm.
and it collects all the plastic debris before it can float out into the ocean.
It's such a cool idea. So simple, but it makes so much sense. Do you know if it's actually effective, though? Like, have they seen a real difference in the amount of plastic in the ocean?
Well, it's a good start, but it's not a perfect solution on its own, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. There are marinas all over the world, How many sea bins would we need to make a real dent in the amount of plastic that's already out there?
That's a good point. It seems like we need something on a much larger scale, something like that ocean cleanup array we talked about earlier.
Right, the one that's like a giant floating boon in the ocean.
Yeah. Exactly. That seems like it could collect a lot more plastic.
Yeah, the ocean cleanup array is definitely trying to tackle the problem on a much bigger scale. But even with these bigger solutions, we have to be careful about unintended consequences.
That's true. What are some of the concerns around those large-scale cleanup projects?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the impact on marine life. Whenever you put something into the ocean, there's a risk of animals getting caught in it.
Right, especially larger animals or ones that are easily tangled.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of disrupting the ecosystem.
It's like you're trying to clean up one problem, but you might accidentally create another one.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
So it seems like there's no easy fix here. No single invention that's going to magically solve the plastic problem overnight.
It's definitely going to take a lot more than that. This review emphasized the need for a multi-pronged approach.
And they talked about this 6-level pyramid of ways to tackle plastic waste. I thought that was a really helpful way of looking at it. Can you remind me what those 6 levels are again?
Yeah, so the pyramid basically goes from the most impactful action to the least impactful. At the very top is refusal.
Okay, so that's like refusing to use single-use plastics whenever possible, right?
Exactly. Bringing your own reusable bags to the grocery store, your own water bottle, that kind of thing.
Right, making a conscious effort to avoid those single-use plastics in the first place.
Exactly. Then, if you can't refuse, the next level is reduction.
So that's just generally trying to use less plastic overall.
Yep. Choosing products with less packaging, buying in bulk when you can, stuff like that.
Makes sense. And then after reduction comes reuse, right?
Yep. Getting creative and finding ways to give those plastic items a second life before you recycle or toss them.
Love that. Okay, so we've got refusal, reduction, reuse. What's next?
Then comes the one everyone thinks of first, recycling.
Ah, recycling. That seems pretty straightforward. But I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right, there is. A lot of people think they can just throw anything into the recycling bin and it's all good. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. Some plastics are really hard to recycle, and some can't be recycled at all.
So it's really important to be aware of what can and can't be recycled in your area.
Exactly. And to make sure you're actually following the right procedures for recycling.
Good point. Okay, so what are the last 2 levels of the pyramid? We've got refusal, reduction, reuse, recycling.
The next one is energy recovery.
Energy recovery. What is that?
So that's basically using plastic waste to create energy, often by burning it.
Oh, so it's like using it as fuel.
Exactly. It's not the most sustainable option because you're still burning fossil fuels, but it's better than just sending the plastic to a landfill where it can take hundreds of years to decompose.
Right, it's like a last resort before just dumping it.
Yeah. And that actually brings us to the final level, which is disposal.
Which is basically just landfilling it.
Unfortunately, yeah. And as we've talked about, there are a lot of problems with landfills.
Yeah, they're definitely not a perfect solution. But it seems like all of these options have their pros and cons.
Exactly. There's no one magic solution.
Yeah.
It can take a combination of all of these things. Plus, new technologies and innovations and changes in policy and consumer behavior.
It's really about changing our whole relationship with plastic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
We need to start thinking of plastic not as something disposable, but as a valuable resource.
I think that's a great takeaway from this whole deep dive. We've learned so much about the plastic problem today, from the science behind new recycling technologies to the global scale of the issue, and of course, all the different things we can do to be part of the solution.
It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has. And, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the problem, but I actually feel a sense of hope after this deep dive.
Me too.
Like, there's so much work to do, but there are also so many people working on solutions.
Exactly. And there's a lot we can do as individuals too.
Right, like being more mindful about our own plastic use, supporting companies that are making sustainable choices, even just talking about this issue with our friends and family can make a difference.
Absolutely. It all starts with awareness.
Well, on that note, we've got one final thought for our listeners to chew on today. We talked about that really cool new chemical recycling technology earlier, the one that uses a special catalyst to break down certain types of plastic. It's a really promising development, right? It could change how we recycle. But it also made me wonder, what other industries could benefit from this kind of approach? Like, what other materials could we find new ways to break down and recycle more efficiently? That's something to think about. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, we'll be back next time with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious.